My boss was mocking my husband at a work party until he stood up and did this. Hey Reddit, honestly, I never thought I'd be writing this here. I've never really been one for posting my personal stuff on Reddit. In fact, I actually don't quite like it. But I really need some help on how to approach this situation, which is why I'm posting here. My name is Jane, and I'm a 35-year-old woman. My husband and I have been married for about 5 years, though we've been together since college. He wasn't exactly eager about marriage, and it took a lot of convincing on my part, which is why we've only been married for a relatively short time. My husband Tom is 34. Things have always been great between us, but lately, we've been going through a rough patch. Tom recently got promoted at work, which should have been a fantastic achievement. However, with the promotion came a massive increase in workload. His responsibilities doubled, and although the pay is incredible, it means he's been working far more hours than before. This shift has created a rift between us. Before Tom's promotion, everything was great between us. He's always been a romantic at heart, and he would do all those little things that make me feel loved. We had 2 kids, ages 5 and 4, and life was good. Tom made sure we had regular date nights and surprise gestures that helped keep our relationship strong. But like I said, after he got promoted, everything changed. His job became a lot more demanding, and though the pay was better, it meant he was working longer hours and dealing with a lot more stress. He tried to make up for it by spending all his free time with the kids, so they wouldn't feel his absence.
No.
While I appreciated that he was trying to be there for them, it meant that we hardly had any time for ourselves. Our date nights disappeared, and I felt increasingly lonely and neglected. It was like our once happy and connected relationship was slowly drifting apart. I knew he was working hard for us, but the lack of attention to our marriage was really starting to hurt. I decided I needed to talk to Tom about how I was feeling. I told him that his new job was affecting our relationship and that I was feeling lonely and neglected. To his credit, Tom listened and tried to reassure me. He promised that once he got more used to his new position, his workload would ease up and things would get back to how they were before. He explained that the person who held the job before him had left a huge mess, and he was swamped trying to clean it up. I understood where he was coming from and tried to be patient. I knew he was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't want to add to his stress. But despite my best efforts to be understanding, the situation didn't really improve. On top of everything, Tom's busy schedule meant he was barely around to help out at home. Tasks like cooking, cleaning, and getting the kids ready for bed all fell on my shoulders. I was already juggling a lot with the kids, and without his help, it felt like everything was piling up. It was hard to manage it all on my own while trying to keep a positive attitude about his work situation. When my new boss came on board, things started to change. He was everything Tom wasn't at that moment: smooth, charming, and incredibly attentive. At first it seemed harmless. He'd bring me lunch and coffee, and always had something nice to say about my clothes or how I looked. I noticed that whenever he complimented me, it made me feel special and valued in a way I hadn't felt in a while. Slowly, I began to change my own behavior to keep up with the attention he was giving me. I started dressing better and paying more attention to my makeup, hoping to impress him. I knew deep down that what I was doing was wrong. I was encouraging his advances, and I was fully aware that I was crossing a line, but I couldn't help it. The attention felt so good after feeling so neglected at home. Even though I was aware of how inappropriate this was, the compliments and gestures from my boss were a welcome distraction. It gave me a boost of confidence and made me feel noticed, something I had been missing for months. I knew I was making a mistake, but the emotional validation was hard to resist. I started staying late at work more often, especially on nights I knew my boss would be working late too. At first, I told myself it was just about getting extra tasks done, even though deep down, I knew it was more about being around him. We began spending more time together, chatting about things that were really personal. It felt like we were forming a connection that was more personal. One evening, while we were alone in the office, things took a turn. We had been flirting with each other for so long that we ended up crossing a line. It started with just touching and looking at each other for a bit too long. Before I knew it, we were doing it right there in the office. At the moment, it felt amazing and intense, but as soon as the excitement wore off, I was left with a sinking feeling of guilt and worry. I realized I had made a mess of things and that I had done the one thing I swore not to do. I felt awful after what happened with my boss. I was so overwhelmed with guilt that I took 3 days off work pretending to be sick. My husband noticed I was acting strange and asked if something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. How could I admit that I had cheated? I knew he'd never forgive me. I wanted to come clean, but I was terrified of how he'd react. So I stayed silent and avoided talking about it. When I finally went back to work, my boss took advantage of my guilt and confusion. He told me it wasn't my fault, that it was my husband's for being too busy. He made it seem like my husband's neglect was the reason I ended up in this mess. I should have seen through his manipulation, but I was desperate for someone to understand and make me feel better. So I ended up continuing the affair with my boss. It started with us secretly meeting, and then it quickly became a full-blown relationship. Even though I knew it was a huge mistake, I felt stuck and unable to break free. I was consumed with guilt, and there were so many times when I wanted to end the affair. But every time I tried to pull away, my boss would threaten to tell my husband everything. He knew exactly how to keep me trapped. He was dangling the destruction of my marriage over my head like a sword. I was terrified. No. Just the thought of my husband finding out made my stomach turn. I knew cheating was a deal breaker for him, and if he ever discovered what I had done, it would be the end of everything we had built together. Our marriage, our family, it would all be over. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him and breaking up our home, especially not because of a mistake I regretted more than anything. So I felt like I had no choice but to do whatever my boss wanted. It wasn't just the fear of my husband finding out. It was also the fear of what my life would look like if everything fell apart. I was scared, cornered, and felt completely powerless. My boss knew this and used it to his advantage to keep me under his control. Every time I thought about breaking free, I would remember his threats, and I would end up complying with his demands. I hated myself for being so weak, for letting this man manipulate me, but I felt stuck. The guilt and shame was weighing on me every single day, but I couldn't see a way out without destroying everything I cared about. As time went on, my boss started to become more possessive. It was like he thought he owned me or something. His arrogance was growing with each passing day, and I could tell he was getting more confident, almost smug, about the power he thought he had over me. He knew I was terrified of losing my marriage and was using that fear to manipulate me even further. He began making stupid demands that went way beyond the affair. He told me not to be intimate with my husband, to pull away from him emotionally and physically. He wanted me to be distant, to create a wedge between us. It was like he was trying to cut off every connection I had with my husband and make sure I was completely under his control. And unfortunately, it started to work. I found myself withdrawing more and more from my husband. I felt so guilty and ashamed of what I was doing that it became almost impossible to look him in the eye. I started avoiding him, making excuses to not be around, and when we were together, I was cold and distant. My husband noticed, of course. How could he not? He could tell something was wrong, that I was acting strange, confused, and worried all the time. But he didn't push too hard. He probably chalked it up to his busy schedule and the stress we'd been under since his promotion. Ironically, just as I was pulling away, things at work started to ease up for him. His workload was finally letting up, and he began to have more free time. I could see he was trying to make an effort to reconnect with me, to make up for the time we had lost. He started planning more date nights, wanting to spend more time together, and doing sweet things that he used to do when we were first married. But instead of being happy about it, I felt trapped. The more he tried to get closer, the more I pushed him away because of the mess I had gotten myself into. Every time he tried to plan something, I felt this deep pit of guilt and fear in my stomach because I knew I was hiding this massive secret from him. And all the while, my boss kept pushing me further away from my husband, demanding more of me, and deepening the rift in my marriage. It was a terrible, twisted situation. My boss's possessiveness and arrogance were ruining everything, and yet I felt powerless to stop it. I could see my marriage crumbling before my eyes, but I didn't know how to fix it without everything blowing up in my face. Things only continued to get worse. My boss's demands became more frequent and more unreasonable. It felt like every day he was finding new ways to control me, to make sure I stayed under his thumb. He would text me constantly, even when I was at home with my family, and he started insisting that I spend even more time with him outside of work. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was like he wanted to consume every aspect of my life. I was living in constant fear, always on edge, terrified that my husband would find out what was really going on. The guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus on anything, and I started to feel like I was losing myself. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare that I had created, and I didn't see a way out. My relationship with my husband continued to deteriorate. He was trying so hard to reconnect with me, but I was too scared and too ashamed to let him in. Every time he tried to get close, I would pull away, make an excuse, or shut down emotionally. I could see how hurt and confused he was, but I didn't know how to explain it without everything coming crashing down. At the same time, my boss's behavior was becoming more unpredictable and more aggressive. He started showing up at places where he knew I'd be, even outside of work, just to remind me that he was always watching. He would make comments about my husband, mocking him, and telling me how much better he was than my husband ever could be. It was like he was trying to completely isolate me from my life, to make sure that he was the only person I had left to rely on. The pressure was unbearable. I was constantly anxious, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the moment when everything would blow up in my face. I started to withdraw even more from my friends and family because I didn't want anyone to see how much I was struggling. I knew that I needed to do something, but I felt completely powerless, like I was in too deep to ever get out. And all the while, my husband kept trying to reach out to me, to fix what was broken between us. He was planning more date nights, trying to create special moments for us to reconnect, but I couldn't bring myself to enjoy any of it. Every sweet gesture, every kind word just made me feel more guilty, more trapped. It was like I was living a double life. The more I tried to keep everything together, the more it all started to fall apart. I was barely holding on, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down around me. It got to a point where I started seriously considering just coming clean to my husband. I was exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. I couldn't take the stress, the guilt, the constant fear of being found out. Every day felt like I was sinking deeper into quicksand, and I just wanted to be done with my boss and the whole mess I had gotten myself into. I was actually thinking about ending things with him, telling him to do his worst, and facing whatever consequences came my way. But in the end, I didn't even have to worry about blowing up my life. My boss did that for me. The breaking point came at a work party that my husband attended with me. I hadn't wanted to go at first. I knew how unpredictable my boss could be, and I was nervous about what might happen if we were all in the same room together. But my boss insisted I come, practically demanding it, and I thought maybe if I brought my husband as my +1, it would keep things in check. I figured my boss wouldn't try anything stupid if my husband was there, but I couldn't have been more wrong. From the moment we arrived, my boss was on a mission to humiliate my husband. He didn't even try to hide it. He was openly mocking him, undermining him in front of everyone. It was like he had some personal vendetta against him, and he didn't care who noticed. My husband tried to be polite at first, laughing off the comments or ignoring them, but it was obvious to everyone that my boss was crossing a line. The whole atmosphere of the party became tense and awkward, with people whispering and giving each other uncomfortable glances, but my boss just kept on going and going. He would make these snide remarks and then laugh it off as if it was all just a joke. He'd say things like, "Oh, I'm just kidding, don't be so serious," but it was clear that there was nothing funny about it. I wanted to intervene, to tell my boss to stop, but I was frozen. Part of me was terrified of what my boss might do if I stood up to him, and another part of me felt like I deserved this, like this was my punishment for everything I had done. But then my husband reached his breaking point. After one particularly nasty comment, my husband stood up. His face was flushed with anger. The room went silent as everyone realized something was about to go down. My boss smirked, I guess thinking he had the upper hand, but he didn't even see it coming. My husband, who had been trying so hard to keep his cool all night, just snapped. He swung his fist and landed a solid punch right in my boss's face. The whole room went dead silent. you could have heard a pin drop. My boss, who was completely caught off guard, stumbled back, holding his face where my husband had just punched him. For a second, it felt like everything froze. Everyone was just standing there, trying to process what had just happened. But my husband wasn't finished. He went after my boss again, and before anyone could react, he started hitting him repeatedly. My boss could barely defend himself as my husband let out all the anger he had been holding in for months. I was rooted to the spot, unable to move. I was too shocked to do anything, but a part of me also felt like my boss deserved what was happening. I knew I was wrong in what I'd done, but my boss wasn't innocent either. He had manipulated me, blackmailed me, and now he was getting what he had coming. So, I didn't step in. I thought someone else might try and break up the fight or call security, but no one did. It seemed like everyone in the room had decided to let it play out. My boss had been such an arrogant jerk to everyone that no one felt sorry for him. Eventually, my husband stopped, standing over my boss, who was now lying on the floor, beaten and humiliated. My husband was breathing heavily, still full of rage. He looked at my boss one last time, as if daring him to get up, but my boss just lay there, too shocked and hurt to move. Then, my husband turned and looked at me. His eyes were full of so much anger and hurt, and I knew right then that he had figured everything out. Without saying a word, my husband walked out of the room. The silence that followed was unbearable. My boss was groaning on the floor, but no one went to help him. It was like everyone had decided he deserved what he got. I stood there for a moment, feeling everyone's eyes on me. I was so embarrassed and full of guilt, I couldn't stand it. I grabbed my bag and rushed out. I had to call an Uber as my husband took the car. I ordered an Uber, and the whole ride back, my mind was spinning, trying to figure out what I would say to my husband. When I finally got home, my husband was waiting. He looked surprisingly calm, but that just made me more nervous. I tried to speak, to say something, anything, but he cut me off. Told me he was going to bed, and then he just walked straight to the guest room. He didn't even want to sleep in the same bed as me, and that hurt more than anything. I realized then just how badly I had messed up. It's been 3 days since everything blew up, and my husband still hasn't said a single word to me. The silence between us is suffocating, and the tension in the house is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Despite his best efforts to keep things normal for the kids, they've started picking up on the fact that something's wrong. They're young, but they're not oblivious. I've noticed the way they look at us, confused and worried, and it breaks my heart because this is all my fault. I haven't been to work since the party. I didn't even bother to call in sick or officially quit. I just went completely radio silent. Honestly, I'm pretty sure I've already lost my job, but at this point, I don't even care. I haven't heard a word from my boss either, and while part of me is relieved, another part of me is just waiting for the other shoe to drop. But for now, the fact that he hasn't reached out feels like a small mercy. The worst part is that I haven't said a single word to my husband. I'm too ashamed and too scared to face him. I know I need to say something, to try to explain or apologize, but every time I try to think of how to start, the words just won't come. And the longer this silence drags on, the more terrified I become. This isn't like him at all. My husband has always been the type of person who deals with problems head on. He's never one to run away or avoid difficult conversations. It's one of the things I've always admired about him, especially since I'm the complete opposite. I tend to shy away from conflict, hoping it will just resolve itself, but he's always been direct and decisive. That's why his silence is so unsettling. It's not like him, and it makes me fear the worst. I keep running through all the possible scenarios in my head, wondering what he's thinking, what he's planning. Is he going to leave me? Is he just trying to figure out how to tell me it's over? Or is he so hurt that he just doesn't know how to talk to me right now? The not knowing is driving me insane. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and I have no idea how to get out of it. I don't know what to do, and I'm completely lost. That's why I'm turning to Reddit for advice. I've never been the type to post my personal problems online, but I'm at a point where I'm desperate. If anyone has been through something similar, or has any advice on how to handle this, I'd really appreciate it. I know I've made a huge mistake and I'm prepared to face the consequences, but I just don't know how to take the first step. Update. Hey Reddit, thanks for the feedback. I got flamed a lot, And honestly, I deserve it. I know what I did was wrong, and trust me, I think about it every day. I torture myself over it constantly. I wish I could turn back time, but I can't. And now I have to live with the consequences. So here's the update. After about a week of unbearable silence, my husband and I finally talked. I couldn't take it anymore. The not knowing, the awkwardness, the distance. I cornered him one evening and told him we needed to talk. I explained how horrible I felt, how guilty I was, and how this whole situation was eating me alive. I just wanted to get the conversation over with so that maybe, somehow, I could finally breathe again. We sat down and had a long, painful conversation. He admitted that he had known about the affair for a while. He had been waiting for me to come clean on my own, to tell him the truth. But I never did. He said he knew he was partially to blame for what happened. He took on too much at work and didn't do enough to keep our relationship strong. He acknowledged that the workload had put a strain on us, but he was clear that it didn't excuse what I did. He said for a long time, he didn't confront me because he didn't know how to. He didn't want to believe it was true, and he was hoping against hope that maybe he was wrong. Honestly, it was a long conversation, and I can't recount every detail here. But what stood out to me the most was when I asked him if he could ever forgive me. I told him I was willing to do anything to make it right, to share my location with him at all times, to become a stay-at-home parent so he could monitor me, whatever it took. But he refused. He said the trust was gone, and he didn't think he could ever forgive me. So that's where things stand now. It's over. I'm going to have to move out. I asked him to give me a week to figure things out because right now I feel completely distraught and drained. I half expected this outcome. I saw it coming, but that doesn't make it any easier to accept. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I wanted to give you all an update. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and I've finally moved out. I didn't want to update until I had things somewhat settled, so here I am now. Moving out was tough. My husband has been incredibly patient through all of this, never once pressuring me to leave before I was ready. It took me a while to get everything in order, finding a place to go, packing up my things, and just emotionally preparing myself for what was coming next. In the end, I had to move back in with my parents. Before moving out, I had to clear my desk at work. That was awkward, to say the least. I dreaded walking into that office, knowing that everyone probably knew what had happened. The first thing I did was meet with my employer to discuss everything. That's when I found out that my boss had been fired. Honestly, I wasn't surprised, but at the same time I was. The only reason my boss got hired in the first place was nepotism, so whatever he did must have really pissed off the higher-ups for them to actually let him go. I'm relieved, though. I didn't have to run into him, and I'll probably never see him again. After clearing out my desk, my parents came over the next day to help me pack up the rest of my things. Moving out of the home I shared with my husband and kids was the hardest part. The kids are confused, of course, but my husband is doing an amazing job of explaining things to them. He's been telling them that nothing has to change, and that they'll just have 2 homes now, which they seem to be excited about. It breaks my heart, though, to know that I've caused all of this. So now I'm back at my parents' house. They're not happy that I'm back, and I can tell they're really disappointed in me for cheating. Even my friends are disappointed. They've pretty much taken my husband's side in all of this. I couldn't lie to them. My husband insisted we tell them the truth, so that's what we did. As for my husband, he's already working on the divorce papers. He told me that I'll be served soon. I knew this was coming, but it doesn't make it any easier to face. I guess this is the end of our marriage, and it's all my fault. Thanks for all your advice, even the harsh words. I know I messed up, and now I'm living with the consequences. Update. Hey Reddit. To start off, this isn't an update post, so if you're here looking for one, I apologize because that's not what this is. I'm just here to rant because I just got out of an argument with my parents, and I'm so angry I can hardly see straight. I can't stand how horrible they're being right now. I get it. I messed up big time. I know I screwed everything up, and I have no one to blame but myself. But can they please stop reminding me of it every single day? I'm already carrying the weight of my mistakes, and I don't need them piling on every chance they get. Every time I try to talk to them about how I'm feeling or just try to get them to ease up a bit, they turn it around on me. It's like, well, you're the one who cheated, not us. Or, We can say whatever we want in our house, and if you don't like it, you can leave. They know I don't have anywhere else to go right now, so they're using that against me, and it's driving me crazy. If I could move out instantly, I would. I'm so tired of feeling like a prisoner in my own life, but I don't have the means to just pack up and leave. I need money, plain and simple. I want to move out, rent an apartment, maybe get a roommate to help with the bills, but I need money to make that happen. I've got some savings, but they're not nearly enough to get me out of here. And finding a job right now is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The job market is crap, and I'm getting desperate. I'm trying to hold it together, but it's so hard when everything around me feels like it's falling apart. My parents are making it worse, and I just feel so trapped and helpless. I don't even have any friends to talk to now. I guess I can't blame them for siding with my husband. He's the one who got hurt after all. But it still stings. I've lost a lot of the support system I used to have, and it's like I'm going through this all alone. I don't have anyone to talk to who isn't judging me. As for my husband, I don't even know where to begin. He's handling everything with the kids so well, and I'm grateful for that, but it just makes me feel worse. I wish I could turn back time, undo everything, and start over, but I know that's not possible. I'm trying to keep it together, but some days it's hard to even get out of bed. I feel so lost. I don't expect sympathy or anything like that. I know I messed up. I know I did this to myself, and I know I have to deal with the consequences, but I'm human too. I can't keep living like this, being constantly reminded of my mistakes and feeling like I have no way out. I just needed to get this off my chest because I'm so frustrated and I don't know what else to do. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Just a mini update because, well, I got served today. That's it. There's no going back now. No fixing what's been broken. It's all just over. Seeing those papers in my hands made everything so real, like the final nail in the coffin of the life I used to know. I deserve it. I know I do. I brought this on myself, and there's no one else to blame. But still, the reality of it all hits hard. It's one thing to know that your marriage is over, that you've ruined something so precious, but it's another thing entirely to see it in black and white, to hold those divorce papers and realize this is your new reality. I don't know what's going to happen next. My future feels like a big question mark, and it's scary. I keep asking myself if I even deserve a future after what I've done. I hurt the person I promised to love and be faithful to. I betrayed my husband, and now I'm facing the consequences. It's just hard to accept that it's really over. I keep thinking about everything that went wrong and knowing it's all my fault. I crossed lines I shouldn't have, and now I'm paying for it. Right now, I just feel lost. What do I do now? How do I start over when everything feels like it's falling apart? I've been trying to avoid facing this, but now that it's here, it's even tougher than I imagined. I know I have to move forward somehow, but I don't know where to start. It feels like everything is broken, and I'm not sure how to fix it. I just needed to get this off my chest. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Sorry for the long silence, but I wanted to wait until I had something real to share instead of just rambling without any real updates. First off, I really appreciate all the advice you guys gave me about finding a job. A lot of you suggested looking into online work, and that's what I've been doing. The gigs I've picked up don't pay much. Honestly, it's barely enough to get by, but it's better than nothing. At least I have some kind of income, and that's better than sitting around with no money coming in at all. I'm trying to save up little by little, but I'm still on the hunt for a more stable, physical job that pays better. As for the divorce, it's been finalized. It was pretty uneventful, to be honest. There wasn't much to fight over. I didn't qualify for spousal support or any kind of financial settlement, and my husband got full custody of the kids. So I'll probably be paying child support once I get a steady job and start earning more. We didn't have any joint assets or anything like that. Everything we owned was either his from before the marriage or mine. So there wasn't much to divide. He keeps the house and most of our stuff. It was all very straightforward, but still, it's the end of my marriage, and that reality is hitting me hard. It all happened so fast, and now my life feels like it's in ruins. I've lost everything that mattered to me. My friends have distanced themselves. Even my own family isn't really supportive. I'm just tired. Tired of the guilt. Tired of feeling like I'm stuck in this mess with no way out. I know I brought this on myself, and I'm trying to deal with the consequences, but it's just exhausting. I guess this is my life now. I'm trying to move forward, but it's tough when it feels like everything and everyone is against you. I'm still looking for something, some kind of hope maybe, but right now, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Update.
Hey Reddit.
I wasn't planning on updating again, but I've been getting a surprising number of DMs asking for one. I wasn't sure what else there was to share, but here it goes. Honestly, not much has changed in my life. Things have been pretty uneventful. My ex-husband and I have settled into a routine when it comes to the kids. He lets me see them on weekends and whenever I'm free. At first it was awkward. There was a lot of tension and uncomfortable silence, but it's gotten better. We've managed to find a rhythm with co-parenting, and while it's still not easy, it's become more relaxed. I guess we both understand that this is our life now, and we have to make it work for the sake of the kids. We've got a long road ahead of us, co-parenting until they're grown, but at least we're managing. As for work, I still haven't found a steady job, but I've been getting more upscale gigs, which has been a big help. It's not exactly stable, but it's better than what I had before. It's allowing me to get by, and I'm grateful for that. My life feels like it's moving in slow motion, though. Nothing major happens, and I'm just trying to get through each day as it comes. Living with my parents is still tough. They're as difficult as ever. I try to keep my head down and not stir the pot, but it's hard when things are so strained. On a brighter note, my sister recently gave birth, so that's been something really positive. Honestly, I'm just trying to live one day at a time. Things are slow, but I guess that's better than more chaos.